The underground talk was one of involvement. People were not afraid to express themselves, despite the violence that was taking place. People were not afraid to express themselves party politically. They were either in support of the PNP or they were in support of the Jamaica Labour Party. It was therefore not by chance that the turnout in the 1980 election, if we were to look at the polling data, reflect 82%. 82% of people who were registered to vote at the time, and you had 1 million plus that was voters. 82% came out to vote because everybody felt that they wanted to get involved, and it manifested itself in the discussions on the ground. In the supermarkets, the discussion would surround the availability of food or the scarcity of food, because what transpired during that period of time, based on the ideological divide which existed, based on the ferment of the politics at the time, it was felt by many that food was being kept and hoarded in the back, because there was marriage taking place in a lot of these supermarkets, where if you want one item, you have to buy the other item. At the petrol station, it was also around what was happening in the country, but also whether or not gasoline was available or gasoline not available. And all these things generated serious and deliberate conversation, because it was felt that Michael Manley and the People's National Party wanted to continue with what was regarded by those who supported the PNP and Michael Manley, the transformation of Jamaica. While the converse of that argument was that the PNP was trying to introduce communism, the PNP was trying to introduce socialism, which is not in keeping with what business and business persons should support, which was not in keeping with what the ordinary man should support, because it was not in their interest. The message was very, very aggressive. In fact, I can recall and seeing a headline, or constant headline, because part of their campaign was deliverance. Deliverance. What was deliverance? Even some churches that were in support of Mr. Seaga and the Jamaica Labour Party at the time tapped into, from a religious perspective, the notion of deliverance. What was this deliverance about? The deliverance about was the Jamaica Labour Party being here to deliver you from communism, being here to deliver you from democratic socialism, being here to deliver you from a government that wants to take away your rights. The Jamaica Labour Party won the elections. The Jamaica Labour Party got 51 of the seats, and the People's National Party got 9 seats. And even when if you were to look at the numbers, the turnout, although 82%, the national turnout was very close between the PNP and the Jamaica Labour Party. But in terms of seat counts, the Jamaica Labour Party won 51 to the PNP 9. So Michael Manley spent a lot of time explaining ideologically what the PNP stood for.
What did he say?
He said that democratic socialism was about growth with equity. Democratic socialism was about growing the economy, but with equity. What did he mean by equity? No man being left behind. He explained that democratic socialism was about the involvement of people in decision making at the highest level in Jamaica. He explained that democratic socialism was about free education, which was also announced during that period of time. It meant that people like me, who were was in school at the time, could benefit. I remember in primary school and in high school, meals were served free. You never had to pay any kind of fee while you were there. Textbook allocation, all these things free. So he spent a lot of time trying to explain what was happening. He also spent a lot of time trying to explain why we had violence in the country, because he was strongly of the view that there was a third party that was involved, meaning outside involvement in what was taking place. So he spent a lot of his party political time and his social capital trying to explain to the Jamaican people that we must all stand against the violence which exists, that we must understand that those who are talking about communism was really participating in a propaganda to turn back what was happening at the time. So I remember very, very clearly the theme of deliverance and what it stood for. Upon Mr. Seaga's emergence as the new leader, he brought a different kind of fervor and flavor to the activism of the Jamaica Labour Party. He was deeply ideological. He was anti-democratic socialist. He was anti-left politics. He came across during that period of time as being anti-Jamaican rights. He came across as being anti-world progressive views at the time. And he brought on board and coalesced with persons who were of that view during that specific period of time. Seaga's campaign was very aggressive. It was aggressive on the economic front. His argument was that the PNP has failed Jamaica and that Jamaica required a leader and a kind of party that can build back the economic base of Jamaica. He was very aggressive on the party political front in that you do not want a party in Jamaica that represents democratic socialism, that we must stand up again. In fact, stand up when you hear the bell. You must stand up against that kind of politics. He was very aggressive when it comes to social activism. He wasn't into this thing because to him it was democratic socialism of involving so many persons in decision making in Jamaica. He was very aggressive when it comes to the marketing communication side of things. He was definitely against a lot of journalists who work out of then Jamaica Broadcasting Corporation. He was not afraid to identify persons across the length and breadth of the country who he figured supported the People's National Party and were left. People were afraid. People were afraid. He drove fear into a lot of persons in Jamaica at the time. People were involved in the politics. And that fear manifested itself when he became Prime Minister. The first thing that Mr. Seaga did when he went to Parliament was to name out some 30 persons who he considered to be on the left, who were communists, who should be identified in Jamaica. The next step, he cleared out Jamaica Broadcasting Corporation. More than half of long-time journalists who were there working, he cleared that out completely. And he went after many persons in Jamaica who had stood up during that particular period of time. It was a very difficult and rough time. Many persons migrated because they believed that they would have been pulled in by the authorities at that period of time. Because the campaign during that period of time was with an ideological framework and a philosophical framework. And you had Michael Manley on one side, who was a person who campaigned and campaigned hard. He was extremely eloquent. He was extremely convincing. He was deeply committed, passionate to what he was about. And on the other hand, you had Seaga, who was equally passionate to believe that he held dear, that he was extremely committed to leading Jamaica Labour Party to power. It was friction and sparks during that period of time. They were each able to pull in their own right thousands of persons to their rallies. In fact, during the 1980s, the PNP had a rally in Montego Bay. 150,000 can't be stronger. Thousands of Jamaicans turned out, and we were convinced that the People's National Party would have won. The platform engagement during that period of time excited Jamaican people. It kept young people glued to their television. It kept young people fully engaged in the process. It kept adults away from doing what they would normally do naturally, because you were talking about two leaders who were poles apart, who were diametrically opposed to each other, but who in their own way captivated an audience.